Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for this webinar on recognizing and coping with your child's anxiety and possibly even your own. My name is Jen Bechant, and I'm the owner of Building Better Futures and the creator of the Parents as Partners webinar series. And I'm so happy to be here with you tonight talking about this topic that is so relevant to so many of our families, especially during this pandemic. So we will get started. And I also want to mention that we'll have a chance for questions and answers at the end. So if you want to write them in the chat as you think of them, that works, or you can wait and use the Q&A at the end. I want to share just a little bit about me and why this topic is so important to me. First of all, I want to start with the fact that I have so much compassion and understanding for the experience that you may be going through. If you have anxiety or you have anxiety in your household, I have lived through that myself. I still live through it with my own children and myself. And so I know how hard it can be and how it can really have a huge impact on the family. So I'm speaking from a professional point of view, but I'm also speaking from a personal point of view as a parent. I am the parent of 3 kids with anxiety. My kids are all teenagers, and all 3 of them have different sort of manifestations of anxiety, and I do as well. So personally, I've learned I use many strategies for managing my own anxiety, and I have also many research-based strategies to share with you that hopefully you'll find something that you could take away and begin using right away. On the professional level, I've worked with educators and parents for the past 15 years and specialize in the area of anxiety and also helping teachers and parents really understand challenging behavior and how to get to the root cause of that challenging behavior. I want to start off by just pointing out that some anxiety is good. Now, when we hear the word anxiety, we usually have a negative connotation, but we need anxiety. Anxiety can fuel us to perform better, to be sharper, to have better focus. And, in this picture, you see Rosa Parks here on the bus. And she talks about how her own anxiety fueled her on that day that she refused to give up her seat on the bus. And so good things do come from anxiety, but anxiety exists on a continuum. So we really have to think about where we are on that continuum and when it starts to cross over into a debilitating level, a place where it starts to impact your life negatively. So if you look all the way on the left on this continuum, somebody with very little anxiety or no anxiety is very chill, relaxed, type B, as they would say, just very, very laid back. And then we move a little further to the right, and you have someone who is cautious, someone who has a low-level anxiety when the situation calls for it. And again, that's a good thing. We want to be cautious. We want our kids to know when something could be dangerous and for that situation to produce some anxiety. And then as you move further to the right, we start to get into nervousness. And again, there can be a healthy level of nervousness, something that serves us and helps to keep our kids safe. But as we go further to the right, you can see we're starting to get into an area where it's going to impact their lives negatively. So being triggered is when now the nervous system becomes involved and stress hormones are released. And that anxiety has an impact on the physical body, on the brain, and on the ability to learn, and it also impacts behavior. And finally, all the way right on this continuum, you can see that anxiety can also create a situation where someone is absolutely paralyzed with fear and shut down. And we see that in cases where you have a very severe phobia. Agoraphobia is when someone doesn't want to leave their house. They're not able to leave their house because of such severe anxiety. So anxiety exists on this continuum, and we really have to look at how much is it impacting our child's life. So when we talk about an anxiety disorder, what makes it a disorder? How do we distinguish between something that maybe we should talk with the doctor about and something that's within a normal range of a healthy range of mood? So an anxiety disorder consists of feeling worried or fearful. And the key here is that it's strong enough to interfere with their daily activities. So is it getting in the way of activities in school? Is it getting in the way of the things that they're willing to do and the places they're willing to go? And if you can say yes, then you might be crossing over onto the continuum where we might want to look into getting some professional help. I do want to say that although I am a clinical social worker, these strategies I'm sharing with you are intended to be helpful and to supplement any professional advice that you may get. So this webinar doesn't replace anything that your doctor can support you with. It just is intended to support what you're already doing. Anxiety is often referred to as the great masquerader. And the reason why is because it manifests in so many different forms. Many times we don't even recognize it as anxiety in our kids. It may appear as anger or irritability. And sometimes we don't really quite know what the root cause is. So the first step in helping your child is recognizing that anxiety is at play. So I want to go through some different types of anxiety disorders and some of the symptoms so that you can begin to start to think about what you're seeing with your child and maybe starting to understand where they might fall if in any of these diagnoses. So generalized anxiety is something that exists for 6 months or more. And anxiety is brought on by a number of things. So a generalized anxiety is basically someone who has this level of anxiety pretty much all the time. You might notice things like your child feeling restless, unable to kind of sit down and chill out. They might seem wound up or like they're on edge and irritable. They also could be easily fatigued. They might kind of have a slouched posture a lot, feel like they're dragging themselves through the day. They're very low on energy. They may have difficulty concentrating, and you may notice that their mind goes blank and they forget what they were doing or forget what they were saying to you or forget something that you asked them to do. As I mentioned, irritability is another symptom that you might see. A lot of muscle tension, especially in the shoulders and the neck and the upper back area. Difficulty controlling their feelings of worry. So you might hear them expressing a lot of worries about different things, vocalizing those things. And then sleep is often affected by generalized anxiety. So they may have difficulty falling asleep. Maybe their mind is going really, really quickly, and it's hard to slow down their thoughts. And it's hard for them to relax enough to be able to fall asleep. Or maybe they fall asleep, but they have difficulty staying asleep and they're waking up multiple times during the night. They're calling you, or they're just lying awake and restless during the night. So as I mentioned earlier, anxiety is the masquerader, and it shows up in many different ways. So you might notice anxiety in your child coming up as negative thoughts. So a real kind of pessimistic outlook on things. I'll never be able to do that. Nobody likes me. I can't do it. It's too hard. I'm going to quit. And so just these real negative thoughts. It also manifests as social worry. So you might notice your child avoiding situations that they were able to engage in before. They might not want to play sports. They might be really having a hard time leaving the house or having social interaction with their friends. Avoidance of certain things. There might be worry about the state of things in the world. So especially with older kids who are watching the news or they're aware of what's going on in the world, they could have a general anxiety about climate change, about politics, about religion, about the pandemic, really anything that's going on in the world that could be upsetting. Anxiety can show up as a sense of overwhelm. I know that for me, this is how my anxiety often manifests, where I feel as though, how will I ever get this done? I have so much going on, and my body feels overwhelmed, and I can feel the stress kind of bubbling up. And so you might notice that in yourself or in your kids. Anxiety can show up as a faceless worry, which just means a generalized worry about nothing in particular. It's just everything is worrisome all day. It can show up as mistake worry, which is if you have a child who tends to be a perfectionist and doesn't like to make mistakes and tries to have everything be perfect, that's to the extreme. That's a form of anxiety as well. It can show up as a lack of motivation. So you might notice your child just being not engaged with things. It almost appears as though they're being lazy, but it could be that they're just really having a hard time motivating themselves to engage in things. It can show up as anger, irritability, and it can also show up as rigidity. So really struggling to maintain the daily routine, to keep things in a certain order, and having a really hard time with transitions and changes in the routine. We're up against a lot because our brains are subject to a negativity bias. Because of our biological wiring, our brains are designed to look for danger in order to keep us safe. So it's very easy for us to notice those things that make us anxious. It's very easy for us to be attracted to the chaos in life and the negative things, and to really hang on to those things and perseverate about them, because we think that if we do that, it will keep us safe. And those negative experiences that we can tend to focus on, they stick in our brains like Velcro. We're wired to remember those things and to hang on to them. And it's almost like the more your child worries about various things, the better they get at worrying. That's the way our brains are designed. So you can get into this really negative cycle that kind of grows in intensity over time. And, I'm going to show you tonight about things that you can do to help them break that negative cycle. I want to mention these 6 lies that anxiety tells. And these are very specific things that you might notice in your child in terms of their own anxiety. So the first lie that anxiety tells us is that the worst will happen. And that is catastrophic thinking. So in a situation, you might hear your child saying, I'll never be able to get that done. I'm going to fail the test. I'm not going to make the team. I don't have any friends. Nobody likes me. So they're going to the extreme with the worst. And that is one of the lies that anxiety tells. Anxiety is really a manifestation of your thoughts and what you're thinking. And then from that, your body begins to feel certain things, and we respond to that. So these thoughts that the worst will happen can sometimes be the beginning of an anxiety cycle. The second lie that anxiety tells is that I can't handle this. And that's when you get, you'll notice a sense of overwhelm and shutting down. And this is due to a lack of resilience in a given situation. So if you notice your child wanting to quit or wanting to walk away and not deal with a situation or problem solve a situation because they think they don't have the resources to deal with it, that is another manifestation of anxiety. The third lie that anxiety tells is that I am my worry. And sometimes we over-identify with our worries and we think that they are part of us. And one of the things you can really work with your child on is understanding that your worry is just a thought that you're having, and it may or may not be true. And so that's what we can start to question. Is this a true statement that you're thinking? Is this really the situation? What evidence do you have? And really start to break down some of these lies. The fourth lie is that I need to get rid of bad feelings. Anxiety bubbles up in your body because many of us are uncomfortable with these thoughts that we have. And when the body responds with physical symptoms like a heart palpitating or shortness of breath or sweaty hands, sweaty palms, tense muscles, instead of noticing that and accepting that that's what's happening, we try to suppress it. We try to get rid of these feelings. And we think that when we feel strong emotion, that we should suppress it or deny it or ignore it. The fifth lie that anxiety tells is that my worth comes from outside of myself. And this is with perfectionism. We often feel that if I make a mistake or I don't do something perfectly, I am less than. And the final sixth lie that anxiety tells is that I'm disconnected from my inner voice. And that really just leaves people with the sense of being lost, basically. When a challenge comes up or a problem comes up and someone feels disconnected from their intuition and their gut, they feel confused about what to do. And so another thing that we can work with our kids on is really being still, being in tune with themselves and noticing what's happening in their bodies, what their thoughts are, what are they thinking, and starting to reconnect with themselves so that they can then have that inner guidance and not feel so lost like they're fumbling through life. A really important thing you can do to help your child, and this is a great starting place, if you think your child is experiencing anxiety, a great thing to do is to ask them what they notice in their bodies. What do you feel when you feel worried? Where do you feel it? And many kids will have no idea. So you can use a worksheet such as this. You can find this on my website, downloadable as a PDF, and you can print it out and go through these different physical symptoms with them and say, well, is this something that you notice? Do you notice your thoughts racing? Do you notice that your mouth gets dry? Do you feel your heart beating really fast or really hard? And you can have them, if they're younger, you can have them color different parts of the body where they feel their anxiety. And what you're doing is you're teaching them self-awareness. You're teaching them to start to pay attention to what's happening in their bodies when they get anxious. And that is the very first step of being able to regulate their emotions and manage anxiety. Another thing we can do is point out, especially with older kids, ways that they are trying to seek relief from their anxiety. So understanding your patterns is a really important part of self-awareness and making changes. So for some people, they will use alcohol to numb those anxious feelings or drugs. For others, they'll be irritable to the people around them. Your child might be hanging out with the wrong people or binge watching TV or movies to distract themselves. They might eat certain foods or overeat, and they might be expressing anger in order to relieve those anxious feelings. So Share these with them. Maybe there's something else that your child is doing to cope, but what are the behaviors that they are using to manage and cope with their anxiety? Exercise, huge with anxiety. Anxiety manifests physically. So with things like shallow breathing and a pounding heart, tingling fingers, sweating, then exercise actually combats these physical symptoms. So our bodies were built to move, and many times we're sitting at a desk all day and we're not moving anywhere near enough. Even if we go to the gym, even if we have PE class and run around at recess, most of us are just sitting still for way too long. So finding ways for your child to move around, to lift, to be active, to play, basically doing anything but sitting is really, really helpful. When you're engaged in exercise, endorphins are released, and those help us cope with pain. So the physical pain that comes along with depression and anxiety can actually be numbed by the endorphins released during exercise. The endorphins also activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps to calm the body down. So when it gets triggered and gets all escalated and the heart is pounding and all of those physical symptoms are happening, get them outside, get them on a treadmill, get them on a little trampoline, have them doing jumping jacks and push-ups, go out and play basketball, literally anything you can do to help them move their bodies. And that will help the body to come down and to really get back to a regulated state. Cardio exercise has been shown to improve mood and cognition. In other words, it helps them focus better if they're trying to study and they are off task or they're distracted. Work in little bouts of exercise and then have them come back and try to focus again. And of course, it also improves self-esteem. This is a really good tip to help, another thing you can do to help them manage their anxiety. So it's called personifying the worry. As I mentioned, one of the 6 lies that anxiety tells is that I am my worry. And we over-identify with these worried thoughts, and we start to describe ourselves in those ways. So what you want to do is help them realize that there are different parts of them. And there's a fearful part of them that worries about spiders and bees. And there's a joyful part of them that loves to run around and play football outside with their friends. And there's an angry part of them that gets really upset when someone knocks over their tower. And there's a sad part of them that gets really, really sad when dad has to leave for a business trip or whatever it is. So help them see that they have all of these different parts within them, and that their worries are one of those parts. And some therapists will actually have the child name the worry and draw a character. So give the character a name, draw them, and you can help remind them when the worries come up. Oh, there's your worry talking again. And talk about it as if it's this character that's outside of them. And that will help them to be able to kind of differentiate between their thoughts and who they are. Exposure to the thing that makes them anxious is really important. As I mentioned earlier, when you allow them to completely avoid a situation or something that makes them anxious, the anxiety grows stronger. So basically, the reason why I have this image here is because you're really doing a dance, a very delicate dance as a parent, as a caregiver. It's very hard to know how far should I push my child when they're really anxious about something. And you have to really trust your gut and experiment and try different things. But just know that completely avoiding the situation is not helpful. So you want to start with very, very small increments and expose them to it, be there to support them, talk them through it, And basically the key is just to break it up into really, really small steps so that it's not overwhelming. Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight for the Parents as Partners webinar series, where we're going to be talking about helping your child learn to manage their strong emotions. This is a topic that has been very popular and something that is coming up a lot, both in school and at home. So I'm happy to be focusing on this tonight and sharing hopefully a lot of good ideas with you, and maybe you'll find something new and different that you can try with your child, because self-regulation is really the starting point for social skills. It's the starting point for being able to engage in academics. It's the starting point for, it's really a building block for everything else. So this is a great place to start, and thanks for being here tonight. When a child loses the ability to cope with a given situation, really what they're going to do is try to find ways to regulate themselves. And you do the same thing as an adult. We all have ways that we try to regulate. Some of them are healthy and some of them are unhealthy. For myself, when I become really stressed or anxious, one of the ways that I try to regulate is by going outside for a walk or exercising. I also like to read to help myself kind of escape and calm down. I might try taking a hot shower. So those are things that work for me, but we all have different strategies that work. So one of the things you can do with your child is to first just kind of take stock in what do they do to try to get regulated. Do they yell? Do they swear? Do they throw things? Some kids just shut down and they won't talk to you. They won't engage. Maybe they go in their room and they're non-responsive. Smoking, drinking, using drugs, all of those things are unhealthy ways to just try to regulate. And that means, like, when they have very strong emotions, they're using those things to help them become settled. Being dysregulated is very uncomfortable. If you think about a time where you were very worried about something or really, really angry about something, you can feel that in your body. You might feel that as a racing heart. You might feel that as a headache. You might feel that as sweaty hands, or just sweating in general. And nobody likes to feel that way. So your child has strategies that they have come up with to get out of that dysregulated state and get to a calm place. So one of the things you can do is look at what they're doing already and see if you can help them come up with healthy ways to regulate their body. Some examples are sensory things like chewing gum, or maybe squeezing, playing with clay, taking a break from something that's very stressful. And that could be going for a walk. That could be using some mindful breathing. It could involve exercise. It could involve talking to somebody that they trust. So there's lots of different ways, and we'll go into a lot more of those tonight. That's what this whole webinar is about, is finding those healthy ways to help your child regulate. So I just wanted to give you this framework so that you can kind of understand what the purpose of the strategies that we're talking about. Another important thing is to really take a look at, what does the fight, flight, and freeze response look like in kids? These are just some examples. It could be something different in your child, but here are some examples. So the fight, when someone becomes triggered and the fight response takes over, that is, they're prepared to fight. They might get loud, they might yell, they might be screaming, swearing, hitting, kicking, biting, really just kind of like getting bigger, puffing up their chest, becoming louder. The opposite of that would be a flight response. And that is when the child is trying to escape that situation. So they might run away. They might fidget, be restless, be hyperactive. They might be anxious, having a lot of worries. So they're really just prepared to flee that situation. It's overwhelming and they don't feel that they can deal with it. And then the third response is freeze. And that's where you can see your child shutting down. They might stare at you blankly, like they're not processing what you're saying, and they're not responding to you. They might go and hide somewhere. They might have difficulty completing tasks and be zoned out. So any of these things can happen, and it could be different every time depending on the situation. But it's just important to recognize what that stress response can look like, because what we don't want to do is experience these behaviors and then blame the child for what they're doing. So we want to understand why they're doing it, and then we can better understand how to help them. So this is the first thing that you could do. This is your first priority in that situation. Sometimes young children or even older children haven't learned how to self-regulate. It's a skill that can be developed, and sometimes it is more delayed in some kids than others. So if your child hasn't yet developed that skill to fully, where they can regulate themselves, then your first priority before problem solving and before using logic or giving consequences, your number one priority is to help them get regulated. And you can do that as an external person. So what you can do is be a calm presence yourself. One thing you can do is, if you need to take a break from the situation, walk away, take some deep breaths, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? Am I regulated? So the first thing you can do is get yourself regulated, and then you can and interact with your child in a calm way, using a lower tone to your voice and slowing down your speech so that they can process what you're saying. And in being that calm presence, your child can actually grab onto your calmness, and it can serve as an anchor to help them get regulated. Now, in reality, as parents, we're not always, it doesn't always look like that. Sometimes we get dysregulated too, and situations escalate. We're dysregulated, our kids are dysregulated, and it just continues to spiral. So if you notice that you're in a situation like that, which happens to everybody, just pay attention to it, notice that it's happening, and then excuse yourself from that conversation. Step away from that conversation and just say, you know what, I'm feeling really upset right now. It's not a good time for me to talk about this. Why don't we take a break, and we can each get to a better, calmer place, and then we can revisit the conversation. The next section has to do with art, and how art can be really helpful to you in terms of helping your child learn to regulate. The first has to do with sort of the sensory impact of art. So here you can see a young child doing finger paint, and this is great because they are able to kind of get their hands in the paint. It's cold, it's slimy, the paper is sort of slippery, and in addition to the feelings of the paint and the slipperiness, they can also create something that represents how they're feeling. And so anytime that someone is able to express emotion through an activity, that's going to help them process those feelings and get themselves to a regulated place. So if you have a young child, I think it would be awesome to invest in some finger painting paper and a set of finger paint. And yes, it's messy, but buy the washable kind, or maybe set up a lot of paper or newspaper so that it doesn't make too much of a mess. But that can be really, really helpful in terms of just helping them to calm their bodies. Now, for older kids, art can be a great outlet because kids can express feelings in drawings sometimes better than they can with their words. So this is an example of a piece of art that was done by a teenager who is giving us a very strong message about how they're feeling. So art, again, drawing is a great outlet. If you happen to have a child who's very creative, artistic, just remind them that this is a tool that can be helpful to them. It's an outlet. And if it's something they already enjoy, help them to realize that when they're stressed, when they're upset, this is something that they can turn to. And then, make sure that they have a sketch pad or something, maybe some pencils or pastels or whatever it is they like to use so that they have it available when they might need it. Origami. This is something interesting that I just learned about. I didn't really think of origami as therapeutic until recently. My daughter is a freshman in college and she joined the origami club. Go figure. So Friday nights, she goes with her friends and they make different origami shapes and creatures and animals and that kind of thing. And so the more I sort of paid attention to what I was reading about origami, I started to discover that origami is actually a mindfulness activity because you're very focused on what it is you're doing in the present moment. There's a mind, body, or hand connection, and it's actually very therapeutic, especially if you're creating something that you're very familiar with. So if it's a shape that you've made before and it's not stressful for you because you know how to do it well, it can be very therapeutic. So just the actual process of folding the paper. So it's something to try. If you think your child might be interested in it, you can go to Michael's or Joann's and pick up an origami kit, and has all different papers like the ones you see here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this 5th webinar in the Parents as Partners webinar series. I originally added this topic to the series because the last webinar, we talked about self-care and the importance of really setting good boundaries and taking care of yourself so that you can be more resilient and sort of buffer the effects of stress. And part of that, a big part of that, is making sure that you are doing everything possible to boost your mood, especially through the winter months, and also to kind of take an inventory of your sleep habits and routine, and just sort of pay attention to what you might be able to change to improve those things, because they do make a big difference, especially when we are under a lot of stress and pressure, like we all are nowadays with the pandemic. Self-care. So this is really important in terms of your mood. You have to take care of you. And we don't often do that. We usually make ourselves the last priority. We have kids we have to take care of. We have family members. We have jobs. And oftentimes we sacrifice our own needs for all the other things we have to do. So, and we talked all about this in the last webinar, so I won't go too much into it, but I just want to recap that healthy boundaries are really important. When we get overwhelmed, or we have way too much on our plate, or we've overcommitted ourselves, it puts a lot of stress on us and makes the likelihood of our mood decreasing much higher. So just check in with the boundaries that you have in your life. If there's a toxic person that's in your life, create some healthy boundaries or distance in order to protect your own energy. Make sure that you create time for just your family or just your friends, and put work aside for some period of time so that you aren't always carrying around the stress of work with you. There's spiritual self-care, making sure that you are taking time to connect with a higher power or your inner spirit, whatever it is that you believe in spiritually, and sort of building in time for that each week. Into your intellectual needs, make sure that you are learning something new, trying something new, reading books, just, having interesting conversations with people, just really feeding that need to kind of learn new things and expand on what you know. Your social self-care, making sure that you're connected. And even if that's not in person, I do a lot of touching base with my friends, my family over text, over phone calls, and over Zoom. So when I don't have time, or because of COVID, I can't necessarily see certain people, I make sure to connect different ways. Your emotional needs, make sure that you are building in time to slow down and acknowledge what it is you're feeling, and not stuff all of your emotions down and stay so busy that you don't have time to kind of feel those things. And finally, your physical needs, exercise and sleep. I also want to mention that if you have questions as we're going through the webinar, feel free to write them in the chat or the Q&A, and I will definitely have time at the end where I'll be answering all the questions. Okay, so exercise is a huge, huge thing that you can do to help. Regular exercise is known to reduce stress, to ward off anxiety and depression, to boost your self-esteem, make you feel better about yourself, and also improve your sleep. When you exercise, especially cardio exercise, where you're getting your heart rate up, your body releases those endorphins that we talked about before with the chemistry experiment. Those endorphins not only work to improve your mood, but they also and sort of act as a sedative to kind of make you feel calm and relaxed, but they also serve as an analgesic. And that means when you have depression or you're feeling down, there are often physical symptoms that go along with that. So physical pain, endorphins can counteract that. They kind of numb some of that pain that you might be feeling and help you to feel better in that way as well. So the more you can get outside, even if it's just going for a walk. I bought a new winter coat that makes me look like I'm wearing a sleeping bag because I hate being cold, but I'm determined to, rather than walking on my treadmill, I'm determined to try to be outside most days. So I bought this big long coat that comes down to my shins and has a big, huge hood with fur, and it's a big poofy coat. And I've been wearing it after dinner. I've been going for a walk, and it's dark out. And normally I wouldn't do that, but I'm really trying to follow my own advice and be outside as much as possible. And I actually look forward to that each day. When I finish the webinar tonight, I will be going for a walk. It's just like 20 minutes, but it's something that I look forward to each day. Light is another thing that hugely influences your mood. And that's why so many people struggle as we head into the winter. The days are shorter, there's less sunlight. The sun that we do have is less intense. And so there is something called seasonal affective disorder, which is a form of depression. And, it's where your mood is decreased because of less light that we have access to. So sunlight affects your mood by affecting your vitamin D, your serotonin, which is one of those chemicals that's part of the chemistry experiment. It influences your endorphins that are released and all of the mitochondrial energy. So it plays a huge role in your mood. So obviously we can't make us have more sunshine in the winter. But one thing that we can do is, if you're struggling with your mood and you're one of those people that just really loves to be out in the sun and you miss it during the winter, you could look into getting a light box. And light boxes have been shown to also improve mood. There are very specific ways to use a light box. You're supposed to be within 18 inches of it, and you're kind of looking into it. You really need to start using the light box like back in August. And what it does is it influences your circadian rhythm, and it kind of tricks your body into thinking that the day starts sooner than it does. So you could put it on first thing in the morning, and although it might still be dark out, your body responds to it as if it's sunlight. So you use it religiously each day to help kind of extend the amount of light that we have access to. And there's a lot of information online about this if it's something that you're interested in learning more about. Social support is a huge part of boosting mood. So we are social beings. We really just love to be connected to other people. We're not really intended to kind of live in isolation. So the more you can be connected to people, the bigger help that's going to be. Now, if you're connected to people where you have to pretend that everything's okay, and being connected on social media with kind of this false sense of positivity isn't really going to be helpful. So you want to look for relationships where you can really be authentic and you can be yourself. You can be open and honest about how you're really feeling, and that person will accept you and be there for you no matter what. You want to, with people that you trust and that you're close to, you want to reach out and ask for help if you need it, and also offer help. So notice if someone is tending to be more quiet than usual. If you kind of get the sense that someone has more of a blank stare than usual, or like something might be different with them, ask how they're doing, and then just listen and create space for them to be able to share with you. And people won't really know if you're struggling unless you tell them. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Your friends, your family want to be there for you, but they may not even know what you need. Feeling isolated. One of the effects or symptoms of depression is isolating. And you feel as though nobody can really understand how you feel. And so rather than being around people and pretending, a lot of times people will tend to isolate. And so if you notice that that's something that you're tending to do, you're kind of shutting people out and choosing not to attend things, see if you can find one close friend that you can confide in, and see if you can connect with them, because that can be helpful. And giving back is another way to improve your own mental health. When you volunteer your time or donate money or resources, maybe you're out to lunch and you see someone eating by themselves and you decide to pay for their meal, or you find a way to utilize your talents and give to others that way. Those are all ways to improve how you feel. Volunteering helps to counteract the effects of stress, anger, and anxiety, combats depression, increases happiness, increases self-confidence, and provides a sense of purpose. So when you are able to find a way to make a difference for somebody else, or make someone smile, or improve someone's day because you're giving in some way, that helps to make you feel better. And for the next few minutes, I'm going to lead you through a visualization. This is a really powerful way to kind of help your mind and your body get to a space where you can drop into a deeper sleep. So I'm going to lead you through this. I want you to just kind of look at this image here of the beach, the ocean, the palm tree, and just kind of soak it in. And for a minute, just imagine that you are here at this place. And when you feel ready, allow yourself to get comfortable in your chair or wherever you are. Make any adjustments that you need to get comfortable. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. And start by just checking in with your body. Let go of any stress that you feel, any tension or tightness. Let's do a quick body scan. I want you to start at the top of your head. Then move your attention down to your face, shoulders, torso, abdomen, legs, and feet. Let your body be heavy. Let's take a few deep breaths. Breathe in deeply, filling your belly and lungs, and breathe out slowly. One more time, take a deep breath in, filling your lungs completely, and a slow breath out, releasing all of the air from your lungs. Now just let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Imagine that you're on this tropical beach, and bring to mind the image of a wave crashing into the shore. Perhaps imagine yourself standing at the edge of the beach, the waves crashing into the shore at your feet. As you look down at your toes, sinking into the sand, you see the waves spread over them and then recede back into the ocean. And as you breathe in and as you breathe out, you can follow the rhythm of the breath with the image of the waves. See the waves come into the shore, then recede. And the water comes in and then recedes. See if you can stay connected with this movement of your breath and this movement of the waves. Feel the in-breath and feel the out-breath. Watch the waves come in and watch the waves flow out. Imagine yourself laying down in the sand, just at the water's edge. As the tide rolls in, you can feel the cool water touching your body, starting at your feet, creeping up your legs, touching your arms, until it reaches the back of your head. Then, as the water rolls out, it moves back down your body. Stay with this movement, feeling the water crash in, working its way up your body, and the water pulls back into the ocean. See if you can imagine hearing the ocean waves as the water crashes in. See if you can smell the fresh, salty air of the ocean. Feel the texture of the sand and the water beneath you. As you look up into the dark night sky, you notice all of the twinkling stars overhead. The night is calm and peaceful. Just the sound of the waves and the feeling of your breath and the stars above. And with that, your calm body and quiet mind drifts off to sleep. So that is an example of one of the scripts that you could use to kind of help you relax and get to a place of falling asleep. Keep your eye on my website. Within the next few days, I'm going to post a recording, that little video clip on my website. So you'll be able to find that there. And I'm also going to email the script that I used tonight to you along with the recording. So with that, I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have or make any comments. I'm going to open the chat and feel free to ask anything that you want.